From the early 15th century, European artists began depicting a moment both powerful and controversial: the Virgin Mary fainting at the foot of the cross. This was no ordinary scene. It was soon deemed too provocative and even banned by the church. Yet Rogier van der Weyden was the first to capture it with full emotional intensity. His masterpiece immediately changed the way artists across Europe imagined the descent from the cross. For centuries, painters copied and adapted it, drawn to its raw human power. Experts agree, no painting from this school has been copied or imitated as much, and it's considered the most important painting of the 15th century. But even today, behind van der Weyden's definitive image of the descent, many questions linger. Why did the church ban depictions of the fainting Virgin? Why did artists keep returning to this forbidden scene again and again? And why, even 500 years later, does this painting still spark intense debate among art historians? To understand why this painting was so powerful, we need to look closer at the moment van der Weyden chose to capture: the descent from the cross. After Christ's death on the cross, right at the spot where tradition said Adam was buried, marked by a skull and femur in the foreground, his body was taken down and laid in a tomb reserved by Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy Jewish merchant. Joseph is recognizable by his luxurious golden cloak and his portrait-like face, turning from Christ toward Adam's skull, a symbolic link between the hands of Christ and Mary, the new Adam and new Eve, and the skull of the first man, embodying the promise of salvation. Nicodemus, with his white-bearded face, supports Christ's arms, using the white burial shroud to avoid direct contact. A younger man on the ladder awkwardly supports Christ's arm, likely Joseph's servant, but the Hebrew prayer shawl he carries adds a touch of mystery. Another man behind Joseph, holding a container, appears rarely in other depictions and has no clear counterpart in traditional iconography. Mary Magdalene bends in an almost impossible position, her cloak slipping off her shoulders, her legs crossed as if she might fall. Opposite her, the Virgin Mary, dressed in blue, a colour symbolising her exalted status, mirrors the prominence of Christ's face. Her grief is so intense that she faints, echoing the curve of her son's lifeless body. St. John, dressed in red to signify his importance to the church, and echoing cardinal robes, and Mary Salome, the Virgin's sister in green, struggle to support the fainting Mary. Behind them, Mary Cleophas, another sister, cannot contain her tears. At the centre, look at the curve of Christ's body. See how Mary mirrors it. Her grief is physical, palpable. Christ's body bends in a curve that looks almost like a drawn crossbow. That's no coincidence. This is a nod to the Guild of the Crossbowmen in Leuven, who commissioned the painting for the main altar of Onze Lieve Vrouw van Kinderbuiten. Van der Weyden subtly reinforces this with crossbows tucked into the corners of the composition, but the symbolism runs deeper. In medieval theology, Christ's body was often compared to a bowstring, stretched to the limit by pain. As art historian Powell writes, this bow consists of a piece of wood or horn and a string, which represents our Saviour. The string can represent his most holy body, which was miraculously strained and stretched in the suffering of his passion. The 14th century poet Heinrich von Neustadt wrote, "He was laid out on the cross. There were his pure limbs and his arms drawn like the string of a bow." Here, as Christ is lowered from the cross, it's as if the bowstring is released, tension giving way to stillness, agony turning into silence. This moment, this fainting Virgin, had never been shown like this in Flemish art before. Her collapse mirrors her son's fall, a vision inspired by mystical writings like The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis and the Meditations of Denis the Carthusian. Mother and son, bound not just by faith but by pain itself. But this image of the Virgin collapsing beside her son was more than artistic innovation. It was theology made visible, and soon it would become one of the most controversial ideas in Christian art. The Swoon of the Virgin, or Lo Spasimo della Vergine in Italian, is the name given to a forbidden moment, when Mary fainted while witnessing Christ's crucifixion and suffering. In theology, this moment is called spasimo, The word spasimo carries layers of meaning. It recalls the Greek word sparagmos, the frenzied tearing apart of a living being in Dionysian rites. And it also echoes the Italian lo spasimo, a later Christian idea of the Virgin collapsing in anguish at the sight of her son's passion. Both evoke a moment of unbearable, sacred intensity, a convergence of divine suffering and human fragility. Images of the fainting Virgin appear as early as the 12th century, and by the mid-13th, they had become increasingly common. The crucifixion carved on the pulpit of the Pisa Baptistery by Nicola Pisano in 1260 already shows her swooning. By the 15th century, the Sacri Monti of Italy included shrines dedicated to the Spasimo. Informal feast days were even celebrated, especially among the Franciscans who petitioned the Vatican to make it official. By the 16th century, these images were everywhere. Pope Julius II was asked to create a feast of the Spasimo. The request was denied. In the canonical Gospels, the descent from the cross is mentioned only in relation to Christ's burial. Joseph of Arimathea prepares the body, and only in John's Gospel does Nicodemus appear. Mary herself is never mentioned. The idea of her fainting came later, from non-canonical texts like the Gospel of Nicodemus, sometimes called the Acta Pilati. Because it doesn't appear in any of the four Gospels, many theologians saw the Spasimo as an invention of emotion, too human, too excessive. Protestants rejected it outright, and by the 16th century, even within Catholicism, images of the fainting Virgin were banned in certain regions. Censorship followed. In Rome, the reaction was immediate, swift and merciless. Paintings that dared to show the Virgin collapsing were stripped from church walls, taken down in silence, hidden away, as if the image itself were dangerous, as if watching Mary faint could make others lose their faith. When Cornelius Bloemaert engraved Annibale Carracci's crucifixion, the church intervened. The print was banned, copies seized, the plates destroyed. The work had to be smuggled out of Rome and secretly printed in Paris, far from the reach of the censors. What had begun as an image of compassion had become an image of danger. Yet despite the controversy, van der Weyden's vision endured, because beyond doctrine or censorship, the painting's power lies in its details, in the way grief takes form and faith becomes flesh. The details in this painting are astonishing. Look closely. Tears like tiny pearls stream down the faces of the mourners. The Virgin Mary's pale complexion stands out sharply against the others, highlighting her delicate humanity. Even a tiny speck of blood on Joseph of Arimathea's golden robe is visible. So subtle, you might miss it after countless viewings. The composition is unique. The figures are arranged in a small box, giving the scene a theatrical quality, almost like a staged tableau, or a miniature diorama. Sharp angles, intricate details. Late Gothic and early Northern Renaissance at its finest. Art critic Dirk de Vos points out van der Weyden's genius in using colour and spatial design. He elevates the painting to the level of sculpture. The corners of the panel are filled with gilded reliefs. The main scene unfolds like a live tableau vivant. Most faces are crying. Every gesture conveys psychological anguish. These figures are frozen in time, yet alive with emotion. The spatial complexity is incredible. The scene barely occupies a shoulder's depth, yet it unfolds across 5 layers, from Mary in the foreground, to the cross, to the young servant on the ladder. That young man at the top reaches beyond the painted frame. He holds 2 large, wild, bloodied nails, probably just removed from Christ's hands. The nails even protrude onto the illusionistic frame itself. This figure comes last in the composition, positioned in front of the cross. But the cross is too small to fully support Christ's body. Van der Weyden solves this brilliantly. Mary's left leg stretches to cover the intersection of cross and ladder. Her flowing robe obscures the base of both. Every adjustment is subtle, executed with extraordinary precision and care. Thanks for watching all the way through. This painting is packed with amazing details, and I'm sure there's something I didn't catch. If you notice anything, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next video.